It's patch week again, and that can only mean one thing. It's time to take a look at how this patch affects our tier list and go over all the changes and all those champions performing their very best right now. These last few patches have had lots of minor changes rather than anything drastic, and overall it does seem like Riot are pretty happy with the game is looking heading into the World Championships. Some new champions have started performing really well recently, and some of the usual suspects are still in those top spots too. So let's dive into each role and check out all of those best picks. Before we do get into our tier list, don't forget to head to our website by clicking the link in the description. There you can find all of our stats and advice like builds, runes, matchups, combos, and tons more. So try out our desktop app if you haven't already and use this to help you rank up in solo queue. Well, let's get into it then, and start off with the top lane. In the God tier we have Shen, and in the S tier we have Singed, Garen, Aatrox, Sejuani, Mordekaiser, Darius and Olaf. Sett and Dr. Mundo move up into the A tier this patch, Wukong and Poppy move down from S to A, Vayne, Fiora and Shyvana move from A to B, and Renekton moves down into the C tier. So Sett's getting some buffs this patch, and this guy always does well in low elo. He's very easy to play, he's pretty straightforward into most top lane matchups, and he always has a way to win lanes and win games. Sett does struggle against ranged matchups though, so you're going to have to be a little bit careful of those Quins and whatnot, but if you use your E well enough, you can still overcome them. The slow on that E is getting buffed up pretty significantly too, so this should help you stick to your targets and start taking them down on repeat, start snowballing, and that's when Sett is really at his best. If you do get really fed on Sett, it's really fun to play with. You can easily tower dive the enemy top laner, you can 1v2 the jungler too, you can roam down into the mid lane and gank them with your ultimate, and you can really just grab the game by the horns and just start winning it by yourself. There are loads of different build options you can go for on Sett, but the one that I'm enjoying most at the moment is the Blade of the Ruin King Rush build. Then you can go for those big mythic items like Stride Breaker or Gore Drinker and then Death Stance and Thornmail, things like that, and you just become so tanky and you deal so much damage too. There is nothing more satisfying than ulting a tank into their entire team and one-shotting all their backline with your W. So give it a go and let us know how you get on. Another champion who loves stomping and snowballing games by themselves from that top lane is going to be Olaf. Olaf's stats are still pretty crazy right now. He's winning a lot of games at a lot of different ranks, and if you haven't been playing him already, you need to ask yourself why. He's the definition of a berserker. He runs towards his enemies, throwing axes left, right and center, and he's immune to CC with his ultimate, meaning no one can actually do anything about it. You press your ghost, you press your ultimate, you start sprinting towards them, and the next thing you know, you're 10-0 and you've won the game on your own. If you do manage to pick up Olaf in that top lane alongside some enchanters like a Zillion or a Seraphine or something like that, you're just going to be even more unkillable. The shields and the healing and the movement speed buffs just remove any chance of counterplay for the enemy team. The best thing about Olaf too is he's such a great counter pick to those tanky CC bots like Maokai and Ornn. What can they do when they can't stun you and you tear through their health like a hot knife through butter? Our third and final pick to talk about in that top lane is still the one and only Garen. This guy has been having a fantastic season, probably the best he's ever had in League of Legends in terms of consistency. He's basically just had a really good win rate for the entirety of this season, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. Especially when it comes to low elo, Garen is probably one of the best top lane picks you can go for. He's really easy to play, he doesn't really care if he gets behind because he still has his ultimate to one-shot someone when they're low, and all you really got to do is just get set up in a side lane and spin to win those minion waves. If enemies come to deal with you, you can either run away and sustain it all back up, or you can just kill them and take their inhibitors. This is really as basic as it gets, but in low elo, this strategy seriously works. The only thing I can't say, guys, is that it might not be that fun to play, at least not for me. But if it works, why not? Moving into the jungle now, and in the God tier we have Fiddlesticks and Master Yi. In the S tier we have Bel'veth, Trundle, Amumu, Fiddlesticks, Rammus, Volibear, Rek'Sai and Kayn. Hecarim and Maokai move into the B tier following on from their buffs this week, Mordekaiser comes back into the A tier, and Poppy moves down from A to B. Udyr and Talia both move into the C tier after just not performing as well recently. Despite Udyr's popularity since that rework, he's just not actually winning that many games in low elo. When Kayn is strong, he's really strong, and he has one of the highest ban rates in the game at the moment. And once Kayn gets that form and starts getting those core bruiser items like Death Stance and Gore Drinker, he just starts to feel a bit unkillable. Now of course Kayn does have that sort of relatively weak early game where he has to get his orbs and get towards his form, so he isn't the best at early ganks. But if nothing really happens during this phase and Kayn's allowed to get those orbs and get that form without too much going on, he can really then come into his own. And on the flip side, if Kayn actually gets a few kills early game and gets the ball rolling earlier, he's just going to become completely immortal. The amount of healing, mobility and survivability and durability and disruption that Kayn offers right now is just too good. And if the person playing Kayn knows how to optimize his jungle clear, knows how to use his E mobility to get around the map, secure camps and objectives quicker, then you're going to have a tough time beating him, especially in the majority of matchups against him. Kayn does take a little bit of practice to understand how he works, know how and when to use his ultimate, know how to use his E to get the healing to get through walls, know how to use your Q against walls to maximize the burst damage, and all those little tips and tricks that you can do on Kayn. But once you've learned them all, you really understand just why Kayn's win rate is so impressive. Now talking of a different jungler that's completely on a different level to Kayn, and that's going to be Maokai. So right, I've introduced some changes and some buffs to Maokai this patch, trying to encourage people to play him in the top and the jungle rather than just support. So we've added him into the B tier following on from these changes, and we're going to see how he works out over the next few weeks. Maokai's ganks are very strong though, and as long as his clear isn't too bad, this will always be a really strong part of his game. I mean, if an enemy laner doesn't have flash and you have your W up, they simply can't do anything but die. You literally just press your W on them. It's point and click CC, it's impossible to dodge, and then you just press your Q and they're as good as dead. You don't really need to face check anywhere because you've got your saplings. You can use this to protect your own jungle, you can use this to scout out in case of any invades, you can use this to check objectives. And then you've also got your ultimate, which can set up 5-man CCs in those early dragon fights. Maokai's potential in that jungle is huge. If it works and he can clear well enough, it's going to be a great pick. So let's see how it works out over the next few weeks. Bel'veth though has been everywhere recently. She had a pretty up and down release. She was a bit naff at first, then she was broken, then she was nerfed, then she was broken, and then she's back into a really good spot now. The way Bel'veth plays is actually quite unique really. She's really hard to get hold of because of the mobility in her Q. She packs a decent punch early game, but it's her E that makes her completely unkillable. And if you're playing a matchup with no CC against her, you simply cannot interrupt it. And your only real option is honestly just to run away from her. But good luck doing that when she's got 40 million dashes. Bel'veth is a bit like a Master Yi. She has really good scaling, she's an attack speed based champion, so she does a lot of damage to all types of targets, and she also has that defensive capability in her E, just like Master Yi's W. But Bel'veth has that extra edge when it comes to objectives with those voidlings. Her mobility can actually be used defensively rather than just diving into teams, and she also has that extra element to her playstyle with those void corals that drop and then turning into that upgraded void form. She definitely feels like a bit of a solo queue champion. I don't think we'll see too much of her in sort of team games, but if you do just want another good solo queue pick to add to your arsenal, Bel'veth is a top jungler to go for at the moment. Let's move into the mid lane, and in the god tier we have Swain and Zed. In the S tier we have Vex and Diana, and Vladimir, Akshan and Kassadin also move up there to join them. Anivia, Victor, Ari and Silas all move down from S to A. So Vladimir has kind of just come out of nowhere, and now he's one of the most contested mid lane picks to go for. He scales like a monster, his lane phase is super safe with that W, and the sheer amount of AoE damage this guy can pump out in teamfights is pretty much up there with the best in the game. Vladimir always has a way to get through matchups. There are a few unique ones that are really hard to play, but generally speaking you can't really go too far wrong. You can pick him into almost every team comp under the sun, you can pick him against most team comps too, and you always know that no matter how the early game goes, you've always got a chance of carrying. And when it comes to solo queue, there's so many throws, there's so many coin flips that you always have a chance to win the game anyway. If you enjoy scaling powerhouses from that mid lane, it's definitely time to revisit Vladimir. Talking of scaling powerhouses, Kassadin is getting a juicy buff this patch, and he's already in a somewhat good position anyway. For some reason people have been sleeping on this guy a bit recently, but he's starting to slowly creep back up there, and this patch will encourage people to definitely give him a go again. Kassadin's early game is no way near as weak as people think, and all you really have to do is not die pre-6, and then you shouldn't die for the rest of the game. Like seriously. You're completely ungankable, you can farm super easily under the tower with your Q and your W, and you can roam so effectively too. All you gotta do is riff walk up or down the river a few times, and the next thing you know you're counter ganking and turning a fight into your team's favour. And all of a sudden you got a 25 stack Magi Soul Stealer and you're just winning the game before you even have a chance to get level 16. Talking of when you do get level 16 though, this is when you completely become Kassadin. Everybody knows just how insane this guy is in the later stages of any game. Kassadin is a bit unique for a scaling champion because he actually plays like an assassin. He's not a splash damage artillery monster like KO, he's not a sit back and poke like Azir, but he really does get stuck in and one-shot people with his fully stacked Riftwalk. And if you haven't actually experienced playing a late game fed Kassadin, then you haven't lived at all. Finally, we just have to throw a mention to the best mid laner in the game right now. And I don't think too many people will argue with this one, because it's going to be Swain. I genuinely have a guy on my friends list that was hovering around low diamond for quite some time. Then he started one trick in Swain and now he's 300 LP master. No joke. Swain is incredibly strong at the moment, and he's had no nerfs for such a long time. The fact that he's just so risk free and he scales so well just means he's such a consistent and safe pick to go for. You can get through any lane phase super easily by farming up if it's dangerous, or just actually going for kills with your E if not. And as soon as you get your ultimate, you're now unkillable and you can 1v2 super easily, especially if you do manage to get those items sooner rather than later. Swain is a demon when it comes to early team fights around the dragon. He's really good at roaming, he's really good at scouting out the jungle with his W. He has so many strengths to use right now. And if you haven't actually played him yet, you definitely need to consider it. He's a lot more fun than you might expect, jumping into a team and just tanking every single person whilst dealing a lot of damage. And to be honest, the juicy LP you'll gain from playing this champion is sweeter than anything you've ever tasted before. We definitely expect some Swain nerfs to come in at some point soon. But until then, it's definitely abusable. Let's move down into that bot lane now then and start off with those AD carries. And in the S tier we have Jhin, Twitch, Sivir, Seraphine and Tristana. Yes, Tristana moves up into that S tier following on from those recent buffs, and Ezreal also moves up from B to A this week after his changes coming in this patch. So Tristana's recent buffs have made her a really good pick to go for. Now she's always been good at what she's good at, which is stomping lanes, taking plates and taking names. But apart from that, if she gets behind, she's never really useful, where the recent changes mean that she's getting ahead more often. And she's just having a better time throughout games in general. When Tristana does get a bit fed early game, she gets an early Kraken Slayer and a Phantom Dancer, she just starts walking around and two-shotting people. Seriously, the burst damage she has with that Kraken proc with her E proc and her Q attack speed plus her jump reset and her ultimate, she just has a hell of a lot of burst damage. Now this helps her snowball when stomping lanes, but it also means she can actually one-shot other threats from the rest of the map. Let's say she gets jumped on by a 5-0 Akali, but she's actually even in levels and she can just one-shot her with her full combo. Not many other AD carries in the game can actually do this. Tristana absolutely tears through structures, and we all know just how important that plate goal can actually be. When it comes to not only snowballing in kills, but also snowballing a gold advantage just through taking towers and everything else, you really understand just how strong Tristana can be this patch. And of course, we just have to talk about Sivir. Now she's actually getting even more nerfs this patch, but due to the fact that the other ones haven't scratched the surface, we're going to keep her in the S tier for now. Sivir is by far the most consistent AD carry in the game and has been since her mid-scope update. She's absolutely permanently picked in pro play, and in solo queue, and in clash, and every other version of the game you play League right now. She's just so solid in most lanes against most matchups. She's really good in any team comp. She has fantastic wave clear, AoE damage, scaling. There really is not too many things that aren't good about this champion at the moment. And her consistently high win rate definitely reflects this. To top all of that off though, Sivir is actually really easy to pick up and learn and just to play in general. Whether it's tearing through waves in lane and just pushing and farming and scaling, or actually just deleting entire teams in teamfights with that ricochet damage and your Q. Whether you're an auto-filled AD carry or you main this champion, either way you're probably going to win the game. Finally, we have a bit of an underrated AD carry to talk about too, and that's Kog'Maw. Now Kog'Maw is definitely not quite as consistent as Sivir, but his win rate is still very impressive. You can't just blind pick him into every single game, but if you do manage to get him against the right comp with a Lulu by your side, you're actually going to have a good amount of success. Kog'Maw is by no means as weak in the early game as people make out, and he does actually have really good trading power, especially with a Lulu. And once you do get an item or two, you just start to deal so much damage. There is nothing more terrifying than a fed Kog'Maw, especially in the later stages of the game. And whether you're playing a squishy assassin or you're playing a full tank, Kog'Maw is just going to absolutely tear through your health pool either way. If you don't have reliable CC, you don't have good hard engage to take him down, he can absolutely make the Rift his playground. And if that Kog'Maw player has good positioning, good mechanics, he can basically just 1v5, or 2v5 even easier with a good support. So if you are looking for a bit of an underrated pick, someone that not really everyone is playing but one that definitely still wins a lot of games, go for Kog'Maw. Finally, let's take a look at those supports, and in the God tier we have Janna and Taric. In the S tier we have Sona, Zilean, Renata Glask, Zyra, Soraka, Amumu and Lulu. Maokai does move up from B to A though, and Leona and Thresh move down from A to B. I just can't stress enough how easy it is to win games on Amumu support at the moment. Your all-in potential in the early levels is insane, and as long as you land both of those Q charges, you're probably going to end up with a kill or two. And every time you get back to lane, you can just spam those Qs again and just farm your enemy lane opponents on repeat. If that isn't the case though, and you can't get kills, or even if you have, by the time you get level 6, you can just start slapping. Amumu's ultimate is such a good tool in 2v2s, but it also is fantastic at setting up ganks for your jungler as well. And we all know just how good Amumu is in those early teamfights around Dragon as well. As long as you land a good ultimate, you get a couple of stuns off, that's your job done. You can basically just retire after that. It doesn't matter if you die, it doesn't matter if you keep on dealing a bit of damage, landing some more Qs, because as long as you get a big multiple target stun, you've done your job. Now when you get an even shroud as well, if you do go for this item, you amplify everyone's damage to those targets by a significant amount as well. So all you gotta do in every single fight is look for a big R flash or a flash R, and your chances of winning go through the roof. If you are an aggressive support main and you haven't tried Amumu yet, why not? Zyra is another support that's having a really good time at the moment. She has really good poke and harass in lane with those basic abilities, and of course really good catch potential to set up fights and ganks. She can also block skill shots with her plants too, which is so fun to do against Blitzcrank and Thresh. And then of course you've got her ultimate, which is a massive AoE team fighting tool and one that's really good in 2v2s similar to Amumu. Zyra just deals a huge amount of damage throughout fights as well. Now if you actually leave her unchecked, her plants and her constant basic abilities can really start to ramp up. She's not the type of support that you can just forget about, and you need to take her out early. Otherwise she'll either just kill your whole team with her ultimate or just constantly whittle away at your health pools with those plants. Despite being in a very good position, Zyra is still not getting played all that much. So if you are a low elo support and you like being a bit of a damage threat too, give Zyra a go. Finishing off with Soraka, and she's definitely been forgotten about recently. Towards the start and the majority of the early parts of this season, Soraka was everywhere, and even with that durability patch 2, she became even stronger. But after she got nerfed a few times, people have just started forgetting about her. But those that are playing her are still having fantastic results. Soraka just grants any AD carry the ability to play pretty recklessly, because you can trade as much as you want and still just get healed up afterwards, as long as you don't get caught out and all in. If you can constantly poke, constantly trade but not commit, this is the perfect scenario to suit a Soraka. And all she's got to do is just throw a bit of poke in there and keep that AD carry topped up with heals. She can influence games across the map with that ultimate and farm assists at the same time for free. Then when you get out of the lane phase and you turn into team fights, you just become a pocket healer. Like literally all you do is run to those squishy targets and keep them healed up. Or you just make those unkillable targets like Kayn even more unkillable. Soraka really does fulfill that healing support fantasy. So if you love saving lives, then you should definitely play Soraka. Well, that wraps up our patch 12.17 tier list for low elo. We really hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget you can find all the builds and runes and everything else for these champions over on our website. So click the link in the description. Thanks for watching guys, and we're going to see you again in the next video. Take care.